Hey, howdy. Welcome to the Mad Professor with Dr. John. And today, you'll be excited to know that I'm going to be bashing Democrats, not Republicans. Haven't forgotten about good old Trump and his $400 million airplane that's going to cost us $1 billion to fix just so he can uh, use it for fly around on congressional library business. That'll have to wait for another day's discussion. But what I mean by bashing Democrats, I've been pretty much a Democrat. I would say my entire life. I usually register Democrat, and I've always looked at both sides of the ballot. I've always looked at the Republican candidate in every single race, but unfortunately, I've never found a Republican candidate that you know was uh, well, I wouldn't say unqualified. Certainly, some of them have been qualified, but um, zany. I would say zany. The best, probably the best Republican candidate for the last 50 years has been John McCain. Of course, he was running against Barack Obama, so there was really, and plus he picked Sarah Palin as his running mate. So that was the end of that discussion. There was no way I was going to vote for somebody where you had Sarah Palin as the president in case something happened to him. Um, but progressively they've gotten worse and worse. My first election, my first election, I guess, was official election. Well, my first election I voted in was Reagan versus, I believe, Dukakis, and I voted for Dukakis. Reagan, everybody's like Reagan is so. Reagan was slash taxes on the rich, raise taxes on the poor, slash services. If you're a student and you wonder why your student fees are so high, well, Ronald Reagan slashed funding for higher education, slash funding for lower education. He slashed funding for everything that would help anybody who didn't have $1 million in his pocket. So if you're one of those young people who go around, oh, Reagan, he was such a, no, and you're bullshitting about the expense of education, well, thank Ronald Reagan for that. Um, anyway, so I said I would bash Democrats. So this is what I want to say. Okay, first of all, we had 4 years, right? Joe Biden was elected in 2020. He was in office from 2021 to 2025, and he did nothing to Trump proof the presidency. Nothing, right? We already knew that Trump had a hard on for tariffs, illegal tariffs, right? In his first term, he put a massive tariff on Chinese goods, and in return, they put a tariff on American farm products, and our American farmers would have gone bankrupt. But then the government gave them huge subsidies, and they're like, "Oh, we love Trump. He gives us free money." Well, he only gave you money because first he stole your money, right? Or he caused you to lose trillions of dollars, right? So you got back far less than you lost, right? Biden then came in. He gave the farmers all kinds of stuff, but did they vote for Biden? No, right? And then they were surprised when Trump pulled back all the benefits they got from Biden, right? They're like, oh, but what about our benefits, our Biden benefits? Well, they're gone. You voted for Trump anyway. So I'm not attacking Trump this time. I'm attacking Biden and the Democrats. So if you knew that's what he was going to do with tariffs, why didn't you tariff proof the presidency, right? All you had to do was amend the laws that Congress has passed over the last 30, 40 years, giving the power of tariffs to the presidency. Those powers are not in the Constitution. Those powers belong to Congress. Only Congress reads Article 2, Section 8. Only Congress can impose taxes. The president cannot cannot impose a single tax. And this is something that was very deliberately written into the Constitution so that you would not have situations like you had in Great Britain in the past, where kings would try to raise their own money and fight wars and other things without the approval of Parliament. Right? So that was very clear in the Constitution. Only Congress can raise taxes, and tariffs are a tax, right? They're a tax on imports into the country, right? So they're not a very effective tax because, of course, they don't distribute the tax burden evenly, right? They only charge tax on people who need those imports, right? And in the early part of our country, there was a huge disparity. The southern states paid a lot more of those taxes because they were importing luxury goods from Europe. The wealthy slave owners were importing luxury goods. So they were pissed that they were paying the tariffs that then went to the federal government to be spent to build railroads and canals in the north mostly. So anyway, um, don't want to get too much into a deep dive because I want to keep this short. All right. So all they had to do was cut those powers back. All they had to do was say, no, presidents cannot arbitrarily raise tariffs. This was only supposed to be under an emergency procedure, something that Congress was supposed to validate after the fact. But it was already clear this is something Trump was going to abuse, and he said so continuously during the campaign. Right? And they had 2 years, right? 2 years in which they controlled the presidency, the House, and the Senate. They could have passed in those 2 years a law or basically a provision that said, no, the president cannot arbitrarily raise taxes through quote unquote emergency tariffs. Right? Second thing, they could have curtailed his military powers, right? Because again, in the Constitution, you only have the president is named the commander in chief of the army, the military forces. But again, he cannot in the Constitution. Only Congress can declare war, right? Only Congress can declare war. The president cannot declare war, and that was again very deliberately put in the Constitution by the founding fathers because again, in Great Britain, the king would constantly abuse his power, his military power, right? Kings would go off and start wars all over the place without anybody's permission, right? And then Parliament started to reel him in and said, look, okay, you can have a war, but we're not going to pay for it, right? You have to come to us again for the taxes, right? So in the American system, in the Constitution, it says only Congress can declare war. The president cannot declare war. Right? And again, this is something that over the last 50, 60 years, Congress has given the power of the presidency under emergency conditions to use military force, right? And so what has happened, right? Reagan invaded Grenada, Bush uh, Jr. invaded Panama, Bush Sr. invaded Iraq without a declaration of war, right? Bush Jr. again invaded Iraq without a declaration of war, right? There have been over 150 military ventures since World War II, right, by the United States military, right? Most people don't know this because many of them are very small, and except for World War One and World War II, only those two have ever been approved as wars, as a declaration of war by Congress. So what does this mean? All they have to do is say, look, you cannot send troops into harm's way without either a declaration of war or some other procedure, which would be easy to put into place. You could put into place for emergency purposes something where you have maybe the president and the Speaker of the House and the head of the Senate and maybe some other people like the head of the Supreme Court, like a super council that can make that decision, right? That at least would prevent the president from being able to just threaten people right and left. Right? So far, Trump has not. Well, he had that attack on Yemen, right? He hasn't put troops anywhere, but he is constantly threatening. He's threatened Greenland. He's threatened Canada. He's threatened Panama. Right? He's threatened these countries with military invasions. right? And not for any specific, just off the cuff, just saying, "Oh, if you don't give me your territory, we're going to have to invade," right? So we knew that Trump was not rational, was not logical, right? So again, we could have Trump proofed the presidency, right? And just on another point, I'm sure you can bring up lots of points in the comments, right? This issue of classified documents, right? I like this. Another thing I'll bring up. This is the issue of classified. We knew last time he stole thousands and thousands of classified documents, and we don't know what he did with them. Did he sell them to the Russians? Did he just brag about? We know he bragged about them with his Mar-a-Lago guests, right? So here he was benefiting from classified documents, right? So again, what protections did they put in place? Did they put in place a system so that classified documents had to be retained by the relevant agencies? The president could not keep classified documents in his hand. It could have been done, but it wasn't, right? And again, this emolument business, this business where Trump goes around scraping up money left, right, and center. He's got his meme coins going, where he collects a commission on every time somebody buys and sells one of his meme coins, and people can dump trillions of billions and trillions of dollars into his meme coins, artificially inflate them in a way to curry flavor, right? Like last time, we knew he already did this. He had people buying up whole floors of his hotels, right? And there was no repercussion of that. And now it's like open season, right? Now he's being offered $400 million airplanes, right, for his personal use, right? After the presidency is over, he gets to keep that plane, right? So again, this could have been Trump proof. Biden could have put procedures in place. Now, as long as I've got attacking the Democratic Party, let me say a couple other things about the Democratic Party I'm kind of pissed off at. First of all, when the hell are we going to have an open primary? That is a primary in which we don't know already ahead of time who the winner is going to be, right? Now, the last time we had an open primary, by which I mean you had real competition among Democratic contenders for the presidential nomination, right, was Barack Obama. He came out of nowhere. And perhaps because of that, he won, right? Then you had before that, the previous time, Bill Clinton, right? Again, he came out of nowhere and he won. And both of those, I would say, were overall good presidents. I wouldn't say they were perfect, but they were good, right? Before that, you had Jimmy Carter, right? Now, a lot of people go, "Oh, Jimmy Carter." No, Jimmy Carter was probably one of our best presidents in terms of U.S. reputation worldwide, in terms of ethics, in terms of if you're religious, you should be worshiping Jimmy Carter's Jimmy Carter, right? Somebody just gave me some feedback there, right? Because he was probably the only truly religious person we've had in the White House over the last since World War II, right? Somebody who actually took his religion seriously. Not that I agree with his religion necessarily, but at least he took it seriously, right? He didn't just use it to whip up the vote and whip up hatred for other people, right? So, but every other president, Dukakis, Mondale, these were all like railroaded through. Then you had Hillary Clinton, right, who was railroaded through. You had Lieberman, no, sorry, Al Gore, Obama's vice president, who was railroaded through. Now, I'm not saying these were bad people. Right? Hillary Clinton, all of these were better. I voted for them all. They were better than their Republican competitors, as far as I'm concerned. At least you may disagree, right? But why not have an open primary so you could have real debate? No, the Democratic Party has this obsession with trying to control the nomination, right? And I will agree with, even though I supported Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders, still, right? It was not productive to have a Democratic Party that was so obviously in favor of Hillary Clinton, right? The result was a lot of the Bernie supporters became disillusioned, right? And this is going to happen, right? Again, I mean, you had Al Gore, you had again somebody I didn't support running against him, but it's like all the support was on Al Gore's side, right? Now, part of that is because he is the vice president, and that's kind of the tradition. But still, have an open primary, have real debates, have real issues. Don't try to cover it up, right? And then in the last election, anybody would have been better than Donald Trump, Donald Duck, I was going to call him. But anybody would have been better than him. Lieberman, Joe Biden was way better than him. Kamala Harris was way better than him. But again, the way they ran the primary, first of all, Joe Biden stayed in the campaign, and as the incumbent, of course, nobody could run against him in the primary, right? That's suicide. Everybody knows that. You don't run against an incumbent, right? Then when he backed out, it was too late to do a primary. So now it's like, oh, let's just hand over the baton to Kamala Harris. Now, personally, I thought Kamala Harris was a great candidate and would have made a great president, or at least a better president than Donald Duck, right? Donald Trump, right? But, you know, it's like she was foisted on the population. There was no open debate. There should have been an open primary with all the candidates. We have tons of Democratic governors who would make great presidents. Gavin Newsom, uh, list goes on and on. I just can't name them all. Right? I want to keep this short. So yeah, the Democratic Party has this tendency to try to control things a bit. I wouldn't say a socialist tendency, but there is a tendency, right? Maybe goes back to the old days of Tammany Hall, right? And it's really detrimental because it means that people, in the Democratic Party who they're going to be like, well, we were shafted, we never had a chance to have our, so now we're going to, no, we're not going to vote in the general election, or we feel, and that happened. That happened with Hillary Clinton when a lot of the Bernie supporters didn't show up and vote. It happened with Kamala Harris, right? When a lot of people just felt like this, we haven't had a chance to properly vet her. I mean, bullshit, yes, because Trump was never vetted, right? But Trump at least went through, in 2016, he went through an open primary season, right? Why he got picked? Well, because frankly, the Republican Party candidates sucked, right? And it was kind of fun watching him kick him to shit, kick him to pieces. But at the end of the day, we ended up with Trump, right? Who is worse in reality than even the most smarmy, right? Even Ted Cruz, if God forbid he became president, would at least be rational, logical. You could try to figure out what the hell he was thinking. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. So please upvote or like or uh, whatever you do on these things. Subscribe if you're so inclined, um, and comment. I mean, what do you think? What do you think are the worst features of the Democratic Party? All right, you guys have a great day. Bye.